All right, let us go to 4.03, retention, recruitment. Ms. Jones?
And I could actually help you out just a little bit, Adam, on that topic of year-round schools. I saw that pop up there. Good evening. As you know, public education is at a critical juncture in the state of North Carolina. We continue to be at the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to pay raises and unfunded mandates and class sizes. So tonight we're going to provide you all with just a short journey through some data, both local and statewide, on teacher recruitment retention and our administrative recruitment retention. But I do want to recognize our committee, and we have some of them in the audience with us tonight and a couple that will be assisting with the presentation. Teresa Abernathy is our teacher support coordinator, Adam Auerbach, our principal at Wolf Meadow, Hilda Batts, principal at A.T. Allen, Ronnie Boone, our chief communications officer, Michelle Klein, who's the principal at Hickory Ridge High School, and I understand she might be in Gastonia tonight because they have a championship or at the second level there with the boys basketball, I believe. Keisha Khan, Director of Human Resources, Allison Hahn, our Teacher of the Year, Brian Hamilton, AP at Irvin Elementary School. We had several board members join us, and David Harrison is one of those. Mike Jolly, who will be presenting here for us in just a second, principal at Northwest Cabarrus High School. Vince Powell, another board member that joined us at our last meeting. Mary Beth Roth, principal at Winkler Middle School, and Janet Smith, principal at Weddington Elementary, and Sandy Valentine, AP at Concord High School. So I'm going to ask that, or introduce Mike here. He's going to start the journey for us, and then Janet's going to jump in, and I'll wrap it up for us.
Thank you, Glenda. Thank you, board members, for allowing us to speak to you tonight. As Linda was saying, we have a lot of data for you guys to look at, so we'll go right into that. The first thing you're looking at is turnover rate over time. And if you look at this is Cabarrus County Schools compared to the state of North Carolina, going back from starting at 2014, going back to 2006. And there's some good things where obviously we're lower than the state, but if you look at that, the gap between Cabarrus County Schools and the state is closing over time. And then if you look, particularly last year, the state actually had a small decrease, and Cabarrus County Schools continue to increase a little bit. So that gap that we had is getting closer. The next we have the retention data, and this is basically just some comparison between Cabarrus County Schools, our region, our state, some surrounding districts, and including big districts like Wake County and CMS. And as you see there, again, going back to 2009, 2010, our 5-year average is still lower than most, which is a good thing, but the bad thing is since 2009, it's steadily increasing. And so we want to look again to work on retaining, recruiting and retaining quality teachers here. And the next one you're looking at, teacher turnover 2013, 2014. And this is basically the top 5 reasons that they gave us on a survey of where they're going to be going. And if you look, the number 1 reason is to teach in another North Carolina public school system. And another thing, we're going to look at comparison between 2012-13 to 2013 and 14. And one of the things you'll note on here is a career change is climbing in the top 5 that people are actually getting out of education. So again, the thing from us is the number 1 reason they're reporting to us on the survey that they're leaving is to teach in another North Carolina district. And again, this is the same data just from 2012, 2013. Again, you'll see the number 1 reason is resign to teach in another North Carolina public school system. Next, we have turnover by levels. And again, we're comparing Cabarrus County Schools to the state of North Carolina, and you can see it's broken down into elementary, middle, high, the middle and high school combination and district. So again, as you see, we are still lower than the state of North Carolina overall, but still over time the turnover is increasing.
Any thoughts on why high school has had a higher rate than the rest?
Thoughts on why high school had a higher rate than the other two, than the elementary and middle? It's at 15%, where elementary is 12 and middle is 13.
You're asking for the reason for that, Mr. Walter? No. I would dare say that, again, those are the hardest to fill positions. And if you look, math, science, and special ed, and I'm speculating here, are the ones that are very marketable and can go anywhere and work.
So demand.
And the next one is basically the same data just for 2012-13. And again, you'll see, and obviously in the last year, the high school did go way down. That it was 15% last year. If you look at this, it was actually at 19% in Cabarrus County schools. So there was an increase in the decrease, if that makes sense at that point. It got better for retaining teachers. And but these are the levels from 12-13. And then you see compared to the state. So again, trend that we're still, in a lot of areas, still better than the state average, but again, still increasing slowly over time. In the next slide, if you'll look here, just some data we got just looking at the other districts that we were able to find. And again, this is based on information that was able to be discovered. It's not a perfect science of where they are, but you'll see there Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools is the largest chunk of where, when we look at the biggest reason we're losing of the top 5, they are going to teach in another North Carolina district, and of those, the largest portion is going to Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. Okay, and then we'll move on. There was a request to add some administrator data in here as well, and if you'll look, we have 2012, 13, and 14. And you can see in here it's broken down, and this is just Cabarrus County by assistant principal and principal, with a note at the bottom, kind of a trend just like with the teachers. You'll see that 6 principals left in 2014, and 4 of those went to CMS. And of the 9 assistant principals that left, 3 went to CMS. Next, again, this is principal turnover, which again is March to March. So this was cut off and doesn't include some of the information on those, particularly that left last summer, when you look at principals and assistant principals. So when you look at that, the 2014 at the 3%, it's a little. The reason it looks so different than the slide before is because that was actually cut off in March, and that's what the state reports. And then again, this is just assistant principal turnover from 13 to 14. And you see there was a slight increase, but still a very, very small increase in the amount.
But that one as well is March to March, is that correct?
Yes, that one is. Now, this is local data, though. The state does not track this. But yes, this was March to
The
March.
same thing, the AP is consistent with the slide before it, which was March to March.
The slide before it was March to March, but the one before that had the January to December data was by year.
Okay. But
Okay.
then came the assistant principal turnover.
Right.
And are those numbers March to March as well?
The one that's up there right
2013
now
and
is.
2014?
Yes, sir.
It's
This
not
is-
December to December?
No, sir.
So do you have a year-to-date number, or you didn't calculate a year-to-date?
No, we didn't calculate year to date.
And there's, excuse me, there's 2 things here that I believe you had links to. There's just the resignation form that's online that staff members fill out. And then we have the exit survey as well that you're able to look at and see the questions there. And the questions on that survey came from Gallup Research, similar questions that they would use just to be able to get some information, because we want to get as much insight, obviously, as possible on what the teachers are reporting themselves as to why they're leaving the district.
We also wanted to look at the current incentives that we have now in the district. We have a new supplement structure that was put in place this year that mirrors the new state salary scale, which put in bands for years of experience. So that gave a little bit of bump to some of our teachers. We have employee discounts, and there's a website page maintained that shows the discounts. They range anywhere from the YMCA to cell phone discounts to sporting events. We also provide reimbursement for a praxis test where they're required for licensure. We fund through Cabarrus Education Foundation mini grants. I believe over 45 of those were awarded last year to our teachers. We hold a 3-day orientation with 2 days in the classroom before the first day of school for our new teachers. We provide lead mentors to work with our new teachers, and we also provide support through the Chamber of Commerce with luncheon and gifts for our new teachers. In addition, we have the new teacher leader cohort program that is going into the third year of the cohort, which has provided leadership opportunities for our teachers. Many of those teachers in the first cohort have moved into administrative positions. We have a Teacher of the Year voucher that provides technology for our Teacher of the Year. We have a Teacher of the Year cash award provided by SunTrust Bank. We have Teacher of the Year gifts provided by local businesses. We have the Teacher of the Year international trip that's funded by the Hayes Foundation. We also do a retirement banquet with a gift for our retirees. We do a Hillbush Ford Teacher of the Month that's recognized here by the board. We have Board of Recognition throughout the year for our teachers for different events. We have no tuition for employees' children, which was started again this year, which has been fabulous for us in recruiting new teachers and keeping our teachers here. And we also give a discount to Kids Plus, also with no registration fee for our teachers. It is recruitment season. We recruit at a lot of colleges, in-state and out-of-state. A lot of research goes into where we do those recruitment trips to make sure that we are getting quality teachers for our time that we put in. The universities in black are the ones that we have done in the past, and the blue are the ones that we are expanding to this year for recruitment. In a survey last year of our new teachers, where we asked them why they chose Cabarrus County Schools, the three top responses were location and proximity to home, the support from the school community, and the reputation of Cabarrus County Schools. In a survey for just all new teachers to Cabarrus County, some of the reasons that they selected as choosing Cabarrus County were the quick and effective communication during the recruitment and hiring process, the resources we provide, the website, the preschool that's available, the STEM program, the state ranking of our school and our district, or that some of them were CCS graduates. So the committee, in looking at all of this information, came up with three top proposals that they would like the board to look at. One is to increase supplements for our staff. The other is to increase allotments with staffing flexibility, and then to fund the mentor stipends for our mentors that work so hard to help our new teachers. Yes.
Okay. So if you have any questions so far before we get to the end of it.
Yes, please. If you could just be more precise on this slide as to what is meant by these three recommendations.
Well, one of the things that's in the budget process right now are increasing supplements and salaries. That's already part of the budget process, and so that happened to align perfectly with one of the top proposals from the committee, as is increasing allotments and having more staff flexibility. The actual funding of mentor stipends could be lumped in with actually the increasing supplements there. So we're hoping through the budget process that at the very least, that we're able to increase supplements and be able to have some flexibility with that, so it would fund mentor stipends, and then to also increase those allotments and allow some more flexibility with staffing.
And so by increasing allotments with staffing flexibility, is that a state decision or is that a local decision? What materially, what is being asked right there,
Okay.
and who
For
would
additional-
control the decision making?
Well, local dollars. So from our aspect, we would be asking through the local budget process for additional dollars to hire additional teachers so that we can decrease class size. And then the obvious part of that would be we're also advocating at the state level for additional funding and flexibility with staffing.
Thank you.
I got one quick question. When you was looking at, recruiting, I saw was one private school. Is that the only private school you recruit at? Meredith, about
Meredith.
Pfeiffer and Wingate and places close?
What we do is we look at our budget, and then we look at the different schools that actually host a teacher recruitment fair, and we look at their number that they offer as far as teacher graduates. So typically, when we get a notice of a teacher recruitment fair, Teresa, our teacher support coordinator, will actually either go out and call career services to find out exactly how many students they average there. We try to maximize our dollars, and that's why. And Meredith is one that produces a great number of teacher graduates, as are some of the others on here. And then we also included our HBCUs, our historically black colleges and universities, from a diversity standpoint. Exactly. Try to be good stewards there.
Dr. Phillips?
Getting back to the increased allotments with staffing flexibility, as a non-educator, I didn't understand a word about what that means, but in your description to Mr. Harrison, it sounded like what it means is you want to lower class sizes, but is that what staffing
that would be the
flexibility
staffing
is?
Flexibility there would be able to, you know, when I'm looking at increasing allotments with staffing flexibility, if you increase your allotment size at the individual schools, then you know, you ought to be able to directly then reduce class size, and that's an incentive for teachers. Mm-hmm. You know, if I can work here and in Cabarrus County schools, and I have a class size of 28 or 30 students, and make the same amount of money that I'm making right now, versus I can go over to another system that's paying more money and have a lower class size or the same size of classes, then you know, it would behoove me to probably go work in another school district. So I would like for us to have the flexibility to decrease class size through additional allotments. And that can come locally, because I don't know that we're going to get it from the state.
All right. Okay. Thanks
The
for
committee also talked about if I was allotted 39 teachers, doing maybe 38 with classrooms, and then that additional teacher may be an interventionist. So that's the kind of flexibility we were talking about too.
Dr. Shepard?
Did the committee discuss elementary planning time and the use of teachers for, we call them encore or special classes at all?
Yes, that was also with the flexibility.
Okay. So we want to move right into our next steps, because that's always important when you're giving a report, and that's on slide 21 there. But from the administration and this committee, one of the things that, or several of the things that we looked at, what would be our next step? Business Partnership Committee. We already have several businesses providing incentives and discounts to our employees, but one of the things that you know, I know from past experience, and I know we all recognize, is the fact that there are a lot of businesses out there that are willing to do things for educators and to support public education. So we want to reach out and tap into our business partnerships, form additional ones, and that will be part of that retention committee that we maintain here in Cabarrus County. The other one is a Cabarrus Cares, which is what I refer to as an educator passport, and I would give Hilda Batts credit for coming up with a name there, Cabarrus Cares, and that's something where you actually work closely with the chamber to provide a listserv with our local businesses, so that we can ask them to provide additional incentives, such as what we're doing. You know, it may be a percentage off dry cleaning, it may be 10% off of you know, any purchase that you might make somewhere. It may be a realtor that wants to be a part of this and say, well, you know what, I'm going to pay the first 3 months mortgage payments for you. I mean, I've seen that happen. It may be something as simple as I go in to eat at Wayside and I show my ID and I get and I should have probably not named a business, but at any business, and show my ID and get a free drink with my meal. But that's you know, that's what we're talking about, because that is a recruitment tool. If I'm standing at the recruiting table in anywhere and I say, you know, it may be Michigan, it may be over at Meredith, or it may be at UNC Chapel Hill, and I share as a recruiting tool that we have 100+ businesses who offer some type of incentive or discount to our employees, teachers' eyes perk up to that. You know, they're looking at that because they know what they're making salary-wise. So that's one of the things. The other part of that Cabarrus Cares and the business partnership is just reaching out more to other businesses for utilities, discounts on utilities, discounts on housing for our staff. And then finally for us would be advocating for additional state funding for salaries and benefits. That's something we continuously do through our organizations, whether it's Personnel Administrators of North Carolina, or it's the North Carolina Association of School Administrators, or it's our superintendent's group. We're constantly advocating there. And then next steps for the Board of Education, while we understand that we can't tell you all what to do, what we'd like to ask on our behalf for the Cabarrus County School employees is that through the budgeting process that you advocate for additional local funding, and that you use your organization through the North Carolina School Board Association to advocate for additional state funding and flexibility.
All right, board members, are there any other questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Jones, Mr. Jolly, Mr. Jolly.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I guess I
Yes,
don't know
I'm
if it's
sorry.
question or comments. I was
Yeah.
kind of waiting until the end. I was talking to one of the principals that left our district to work in a neighboring district. And the comment that they made to me was that people quit people. They don't quit jobs. And so it got me thinking and talking to others. And it made me realize that I think we need to look for ways to support our teachers and our staff members that maybe have nothing to do with money. Ways that we can support them in the classroom and in their buildings by giving them more freedom and more autonomy in their jobs, whether it's a principal or a classroom teacher. And I would like to see us put different mechanisms in place to receive feedback from those teachers. And, you know, I was only at one teacher retention meeting, so
Well,
I'm
we had
kind of
three.
you had 3 of them. And I can't remember if Allison was there, but she was the only teacher that was on there. And I find it a little unusual that there wasn't, you know, a lot of teachers there to kind of talk about teacher retention. I would kind of want to hear from them, which I have in large numbers lately. But utilizing any possible mechanism that has nothing to do with money, I think is something we need to explore. And I would like to pursue that as a district. And in doing that, putting the relationships that we have with our current teachers. I know that we talked a little bit about recruiting, and that's recruiting is great, but if we keep them here, we don't have to recruit somebody to fill their seat. Of course, in our situation, we're growing, so we're going to have to recruit anyway. But anyway, just some of my thoughts on that, having spoke with a number of principals and teachers over the last several weeks. And I look forward to the Teacher Retention Committee possibly adding teachers to that committee. You know, I know Ms. Hahn does a wonderful job, but maybe getting a couple other voices on there to speak on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Carolyn?
Well, I agree with Vince 100%, and I'm with him. I got an email today, and you probably got the same one, and they were giving suggestions that didn't cost us a red cent, and it was great suggestions, and it was saying things that again didn't cost us anything, and and if they had an email where they could send it, and this individual, she was very frank, very upfront, and I was very appreciative of the email she sent, and it was things that we could do that were very simple, and I was very appreciative of her email, and this was an elementary teacher, and I think they struggle more than anybody because time-wise and we dealt with this and talked about it. They have less planning time than anybody, and I don't think we've overcome this hurdle yet. And I think that's something that we still need to do something about, because the high schools and the middle schools have more planning time than our elementary teachers, and that has to really frustrate them more than anything else. And I can't believe we don't lose more than we do, and that's something we need to do something about. And so I agree with Vince 100%, trying to get more input from them. I mean, we need to look at the people that are on the front lines and hear what they've got to say. And then we wouldn't have to be doing the recruiting. Amen, brother.
Yeah, I agree. with both of you. You know, as a school board member, we don't have funds. The only money we have is money that's given to us by either the state, the federal government, or the county. And so I feel powerless when I am told that the way that I can help retain teachers is to give more funding that I don't have. That's out of my control. I can beg, I can plead, but I don't think I'm going to be listened to very much. Last year I sent emails to one of our local school, state representatives, and he never even replied to my email, so it shows you how much weight I have. What I do have power over are the things that Carolyn and Vince were just talking about. We control some of the things that we ask our teachers to do. What I would like to hear is, what are the biggest sources of frustration that our current teachers have? And then if there's a pattern that comes up in that, maybe we can talk about, well, let's take away one of those things. And so that by subtraction, we can actually add to their job satisfaction. And just as another thing, I noticed the link to the new, or to the exit survey, and I was wondering, how long have we been doing that exit survey, and can we extract information out of that that's saying, oh, okay, here's some things that seem to be common in the teachers that are leaving.
Well, as you may or may not know, in the past it was a paper survey, and we've talked about this from the board before, and the actual electronic survey is just a few months old in the development of that and putting it out there and putting the electronic resignation form. And the purpose behind that was to actually try to collect the data, because it's, that's optional,
Right.
whether they fill it out or not. But I sent you all the copy of the questions, and if you go into the actual link, I've resigned a number of times as Santa Claus, just testing it. To be able to go through it. Once you go through the resignation form, at the bottom of that form, it will come back and thank you, and then it will ask you to complete the exit survey, and it lets you know that it's optional, and it also gives you a contact if you'd like a paper copy, because some folks, and I believe that was a suggestion of Mr. Powell's, that folks be offered a hard copy of that. And as to extracting it, yes, that's what we're working toward, because that will be able to dump that back into a spreadsheet so that we can extract that data. And I will say that the survey that Janet talked about earlier was this year's survey that we sent out to all the new hires in the county, and asked them to respond to that and tell us, why did you come? And so not only did we give you the top 3 reasons, but we extracted what seemed to be a pattern as to why they came to Cabarrus County. And again, the monetary part of that is not, that's not what is necessarily, going back to what Mr. Powell said, that's not always the primary reason why educators teach. It is nice to be able to pay your bills, though.
Yeah.
So I will say that, both of those have a lot of credence, and that, there are things that we're trying to look at by thinking outside of the box, and see what are some other ways that we can retain without the money. But from our perspective, you all are the advocates from the political side of the house, while we can advocate, yet we understand that you just don't have a pot of gold like Kelly does sitting under her desk to be able to hand that out. But I will say that I agree that with the retention committee, and we have not formulated what that's going to look like going forward. When we put together this recruitment and retention committee, it was just in the last couple of months that we did that. And pulling teachers out of the classroom is a very difficult thing to do. And we put the teacher of the year on the committee, and then we will definitely look at doing this after school hours and being able to incorporate some representatives from other teacher representatives to be on the committee. And I know you have a teacher advisory committee too, Dr. Shepard, and we get a lot of data that way.
Okay. I have one last question. That was on the survey of the new teachers. One of the things that popped up as an attractive thing was the preschool. And I'm just wondering, do we have enough openings at our preschool? Do we have enough space, or do we have to turn teachers' children away?
I'm sorry. There's a waiting list. I had to look to Jason for that answer. There's a waiting list for that,
So
for
that
preschool.
might be,
I think,
Mary Frances Wall is full. Is that the?
Is there
no,
any-
I hired someone mid-year, and she was able to get her child in.
Okay.
Oh.
Mary Frances usually enrolls. We typically have a waiting list for all of our other preschool programs, but Mary Frances usually can get But that's one of the reasons we keep talking about blended funding for preschool and opening more slots.
So that's another reason to look at increasing the number of preschool openings that we have. Okay.
Yep, go ahead, Ms. Carpenter.
Mr. Jolly, I have sent you that email that I just referred to, and you could share that with y'all's committee.
I will. Thank
That one from the teacher, and that may be helpful because they did list a lot of information. So if you would share that, but I did have your email, so I did send that to you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Don't praise my recommendation too much. One of my suggestions on the exit survey was, would you like a board member to call you for administrative resignations? So you might be asked to do a little bit more.
Okay, guys, with that one, on this end, any more comments? Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're keeping this on top of mind and that we're moving forward. And we're saying that 14% is not, even if it's less than the state, that it's important to us that we retain our teachers. There are a couple on that list that you showed that states that were also, or counties, I'm sorry, school districts that were doing well. Have we talked to your counterparts there? Or what kind of things are they doing? Or is it to keep their numbers lower?
When you
Like
look
Gaston
at,
and
I talk with these counterparts quite a bit, but I have not asked them specifically if I've not looked at their data close enough to see if it aligns with the same reasons that our folks are leaving us. But that's something that I can certainly do. I have a meeting with them on Friday.
okay. I'm also going to echo the non-financial things that we could probably look at. And then lastly, recruitment. I mean, some of the things, I think business partnerships is excellent. When we sat through the new teacher luncheon that we had, one of the things that a lot of the new teachers were housing, especially once you've recruited from outside the area. Where do they go? They just, that maybe there's a partnership there that we could.
It is. That was one of the things that we talked about is having a list for housing, and we do have a
Housing,
list.
partnership with roommates. I don't know. However you can make it easier for newer folks coming into our community. And then, again, you've heard me say this before, but I think we ought to be focusing on recruitment that doesn't cost us much. And we have a LinkedIn page that we are not utilizing very well. Charlotte Mecklenburg is out there very aggressive with their page. There's even our page itself has over 1,000. What does it say here? It has over 1,100 employees are on LinkedIn here. People look at this stuff to find information. New teachers, they have their resumes out there. They have that information. I think it doesn't cost us a whole lot, staff time maybe, but there's an opportunity there that we can be more aggressive on those. Thank you.
Mr. Harrison.
Well, this question is really for Dr. Probst, and it pertains to Kids Plus. I don't quite know year over year if Kids Plus always stays in the black, but I often read emails and updates about Kids Plus that leads me to believe that it tends to balance out or stay in the black. Maybe I'm mistaken about that, but that is a bucket of money that we do control, I think. I could be wrong. It might be going to a variety of other expenses, but the general question is, we're giving a 10% discount for Kids Plus. Why can't we give 15% discount or 20% discount or a 50% discount? Why can't we? I'm sure there's a perfectly good reason why we can't, but why is it only 10, and why can't we adjust it to a higher amount to make a true and material difference for the teachers who have kids in our Kids Plus program?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your comment. That's all I have to say.
And then she sits down and she'll deal with me after this meeting. No,
let me give you a little
we
bit.
can afford it. We can afford it. We can afford it. We can afford it.
Okay,
for our teachers.
Let me give you a little history. We have been in the red before, and it's only been the last 3 years that we've gotten out of the red. And when our numbers are lower than 600, we tend to get in the red because the operating expenses, the in-kind expenses, that's my rant, But you're exactly right. Since we've been rising in the last 3 years, we went to 800, then 900, and proudly we're at 1,000. We are in the black. Certainly, we can look at that. I will tell you, I would like to, just like we do in child nutrition, try to aim between 2 and 3 months operating expense. I would like to have that. Any good business would, and then obviously look at if we can increase that ratio, that expense. And I accept that challenge, and I will be back with you.
Dr. Probst, how long have you been managing Kids Plus?
I have been managing Kids Plus for 3 years, thank you.
It's prudent and practical. Consider it.
I think anytime a business can have a surplus of money, and once they cover those operating costs in case it's another recession, certainly you need to look at how either you lower your costs to help your kids and your parents, or in this case, if we want to look at doing something for our employees, it's certainly something to look at. Thank you. It's a good suggestion.
All right. Are there any, Tim? Okay. I thought you were waving like you wanted to get on. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Go for it, bud.
Well, I have one comment. Ms. Smith, as far as the elementary teachers, which seems to be the one group that probably has the least amount of time, what efforts have you and the principals from the elementary level have y'all taken to work with them to try to figure out how you can create more margin in their days so that they'll have more planning time? Or is that something that you're in the process of doing? Or because I really think that the principals and the teachers in that area, the closest to, most knowledgeable of, could create some type of continuous improvement effort in that area. So can you give us an idea where you and the principals are on this?
We've come a long way with the addition of Encore teachers that Jason's given us. We can always have more, but by having common planning, by using those Encore teachers has helped us. We've also, at my school, been creative with some of our Title I money to have some positions that we use to help give some release time. What they have appreciated the most are the early release days. And if we could have those once a month, that's free to the board, and not have required training, but training where they could plan with their PLCs at the schools, they would absolutely love that. It would be very beneficial.
Now, can the PLCs actually work on planning and actually developing margin in the classroom by not just talking about data on how students learn, but also talk about what can we do to make our days shorter as far as the in-classroom and longer as far as our planning time? Is that something that's part of the PLC effort, and could it be a part of the PLC effort, as far as a continuous improvement process? Because, part of data is how much time did I have to plan, and I don't know if that's a part of the way they think when they get into these meetings, because some of them seem, some of the emails that we've received seem to discount meeting weekly on the PLC, and so are they attacking the right objects and the right things in those meetings, or have they kind of been looking in one direction rather than all the directions? So,
Well, I think they need time for both. They need time to plan once they look at that data in their PLCs. And our teachers are working harder than they ever have, but they're doing a better job than they ever have. And it's because they do have access to meaningful data. When a child's not performing, they know why, and they can pinpoint. So they need the PLC time to look at the data and work on that. And we also do that through data teams, but they also need the planning time to plan the lessons to help meet those individual needs. So it's a combination of both. And how they help us determine how to make that happen at my school is a lot through the budgeting process when we figure out how we're going to use our Title I dollars, because we pay for some planning time out of that too. And I think that's done at other schools too. Some that aren't Title I support it through their PTO program supporting planning days. So it's kind of a combination.
Would you be open to having TAs cover recess, for example, something like that, if you were giving TA support to just cover recess instead of your certified staff out there? Would that create some planning time for them? Something like that.
It would. Our TAs, though, have become more instructional support, and they're doing a lot of our intervention work. So they're really...
While your certified people are standing watching the...
Well, with Title I money, we have purchased what we call character coaches, and they're doing some of our organized play out on the playground. So we've kind of covered that way.
Gotcha.
But yes, we would love to have a combination of both.
Okay. What about reduced testing requirements that maybe you could run your EC programs or your EC classes more continuously, I guess? We're getting a lot of feedback from teachers that they would just like to teach instead of assess. We're just kind of looking at ways to do that as well.
If we could pick and choose what the state has us do from what we do here that's meaningful, yes. Obviously, we're hand-tied by the state with a lot of the assessment they're making us do. But I think if you ask the elementary teachers and the principals, the data that we're getting here locally with our assessments are really what helps drive that instruction in the classroom.
Okay, thank you.
All right, board members, any other discussion? Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate it. All right, let's go to section 5, budget amendments, 5.01. Ms. Klutz.
Yes, sir. I have budget amendments for you today. Whoops, there we go. We have, let's see, I think we have 4 budget amendments. We'll start with state. The first one's just a reclass of the early college high school funds. The second one is the state allotment for the first semester of the early college transportation allotment. That's not guaranteed. We request those funds and they allot those. The next one is just a standard allotment of a state reimbursement for substitutes. And the last one is an allotment for equipment for CTE. Questions for state? Okay. Next one's federal. The first one is for an increase in Title I allotment. It's the variance of from the planning allotment that was given to us to the actual allotment. And then there's the grant award for the special needs target assistance grant. And Dr. Phillips had some questions about that, and we sent the information to him more detailed. Do you not? Sorry, you did.
I saw the email, but I
Okay.
have not had time to read
So
it.
I actually have.
If
that.
I have questions, I will ask
do-
you about it during
Okay.
the week.
I do
That's
have
okay.
that information here. The Title I schools were distributed. The funds are distributed to the schools based on the poverty rates. They're buying supplies and materials for the summer bridge program for the 5th graders. In the Title I schools transitioning to middle schools. The schools will use the increased funding for tutors in the spring semester. They're doing to bridge guided reading libraries, purchase reading interventions. They're purchasing laptops, iPads. They're continuing to support digital conversion, and then they're doing materials for after-school programs that will be offered at A.T. Allen and Weddington Hills. Okay, and so then for the PRC 118, that's a lot of staff development. It's a grant from the state. It's the University of Kansas, where they have consultants come into the district and train the schools in content literacy, content curriculum, easy for me to say. They're helping the schools build a good literacy foundation and will provide effective interventions for students at risk of failure due to low literacy skills.
Back to the Title I question.
Yes.
This is money above what we were planning. How long have they known this is coming, or is this just new money that, hey, we've now got here's some money to play with or use to finish what you couldn't have got done?
They became aware, I believe, probably about January of this additional fund. So the federal fiscal year starts in October, runs October to October, November to November. So that would be the initial allotment, and then so when we get an adjustment to it, we don't get that until much later.
On a percentage basis, how much more is this over the?
Do you know, where did she go? She left. She's,
Is it 5% more? Is it less than that? I mean, it's a big number. So
I'm sorry. No, that's the total of the total federal programs. That's not the total of the. But I can send you that. That it is a significant amount. But the schools certainly can use those additional dollars. But I'll send that to you. So the Kids Plus, and this is what Dr. Probst was talking about earlier, the enrollment has increased, and therefore she's anticipating additional revenue. Therefore, we're budgeting the revenue so that she can spend those additional dollars. She's got enrollment, so she'll have to have additional expenses to match that. Okay. And then the last one is the local special, so that's where our grants come in. And those are just small changes there. So questions on that? Okay.
Any other discussions? If you want to move this to consent?
Yep.
All right, let's go to consent on that one. Next one is 5.02, school maintenance agreement. Ms. Klutz?
Okay. This is the school maintenance agreement between Cabarrus County, Kannapolis City Schools, and Cabarrus County Schools. And the purpose of this agreement is so that we can provide the maintenance for Kannapolis City Schools. And so it allows Cabarrus County to give the funding to us and us to provide the maintenance for Kannapolis City Schools. It also talks in the agreement about Kannapolis giving the funding to us for the Rowan County students that are in Kannapolis City, so that we're providing the maintenance for those, for all of those buildings in this agreement. So there's a lot of details about taking care of the buildings and the properties in the agreement. I have reviewed it. Chuck Taylor has reviewed it. Our attorneys have reviewed it. I think many of the board members have reviewed it, and we've had several copies to go, revisions to go back and forth. So if there are any other questions or comments at this point, we'll address them.
Board members, if you will notice in board docs that the latest and greatest is the last one, school maintenance agreement fiscal year 15 through 19, 3.115 board comments. So if you'll look on that, you'll see the latest markup that Mr. Enrique provided to us.
And Ms. Klutz, what was the risk, if any, of going without an agreement for 8 months from July through now? And if there was no risk, that begs the question, why have an agreement? I'm not sure what the normal cycle is and what the background or purposes of not having an agreement in place during this period of time was, but what have we incurred expenses that we would not have incurred in this 8 months had there been an agreement in place?
So I'm going to defer to our attorney for part of that, but I will answer the other part. So we have incurred expenses, but we have also collected the revenue associated with those expenses. So I'll let Sarah
So we're in balance.
Certainly.
We've balanced with.
We're in the same position that we would have been without the contract.
Okay.
We good?
Having an agreement in place just gives us that additional certainty and additional protections.
And if you will note, in the new revised mark, also put in that this agreement will continue thereafter for successive one-year terms unless either party provides notification before May 1st. So I think that answers your. So they will continue on ad infinitum if we don't ever do another agreement
So
again.
that means it will not come back to us.
It will come back to us. We'll do successive 5-year agreements. However, if in 5 years the group forgets to bring this up and we get 6 months into it and realize that we forgot to do a contract, we're already in a contract and everybody agrees to the terms of the contract. So it protects us. And that was my concern, was what is our remedy for going forward if someone wants to take issue with, hey, we did this without a contract, and then we get loopy with it, so.
Yeah, because those numbers would change, or do you fill those numbers in? Because they're showing numbers of students, because those are gonna change. Do you fill those in each year?
It's a minimum, I believe.
5 of.
You'd have to have an addendum for that, wouldn't you?
Because that would have to change, and the years would change. So you're going to change those each year?
We change them in the year of the contract.
Oh, okay.
The funding is a minimum funding,
Oh, okay.
because we don't want it to go below.
Oh, all right.
Can you, again, explain the funding here? Because there's another element of this thing that we didn't mention that's that we're taking care of. We have an agreement with the county to take care of some athletic fields that have some, I guess, sporting event or sports groups, right? Is that?
You're talking about the parks agreement, the
parks, there's a
$50,000?
parks part? Yeah. Can you explain that a little bit?
So there's an annual allocation of $50,000 that comes here and is held here, but is authorized by the parks by a work order system. So it's for the school park facilities.
Okay.
And so those are listed on the schedule, those park facilities. And so Londa or her group authorizes by a work order when work needs to be done on those facilities. And we do the work and we bill against that account and charge that account for the work, up to $50,000 a year.
So do we want to be consistent and keep a minimum of $50,000 in that account, or is that?
There is.
Because we don't say that in here, I don't think.
That $5,000 refers to if the balance, if we go below, if we spend $45,000, we have to tell them we only have $5,000. We have to request more.
Okay, but we don't say anywhere in here that we start with $50,000, that's all. But we do say we want to make sure that we have, $1,471,000 for grounds, and we want to make sure that we have $7,288,000 for buildings and facilities. If we're being consistent, I think we just ought to put a number in that section.
Okay, we could.
Well, I don't know why they might want to increase it to 55. It just.
Well, same with these other numbers. These numbers would be to increase. These are just a minimum.
We could say a minimum.
I don't know. It's just difficult to read it. We're talking different things for different sections here that make it a little more difficult to understand, especially the part where you were talking about Kannapolis City Schools, how they pay, the county pays, and then we contribute. And there's 3 separate buckets of money, or 2 separate buckets.
So the county gives us our money, the county gives us Kannapolis money, and then Kannapolis gives us the money that they get for the Rowan students. So it's 3 buckets of money.
Okay,
It's
not clear when I read it. That's all. But I understand that there is a process. This is supposed to reflect that process. Just from the layman trying to read that, it's difficult to try to figure that one out. That was really my comment to it, is to keep it somewhat consistent. So that's it.
All right, board members, Dr. Phillips?
There's one typo in Schedule 2 that I found. It says Harris Road Elementary. Of course, it should be Harris Road Middle.
in Schedule 2.
Schedule 2, school parks.
Okay. We'll fix it. That's
that Harris Road, or is that actually Odell?
I'll check.
It says football, soccer football, so that would be the middle school.
Okay.
They're the ones that have the football field.
Board members, we're going to put this on the action agenda? Okay. Moving on to 5.03, school picture bids. Dr. Louder?
Good evening. Just wanted to give you a summary of the school picture bid process, and this is the bid process for K-8 information. I think you have the tabulation. We today in the boardroom opened up the bids from the 5 companies that bid. One of the companies has a couple guys here in the back, I think, tonight. And I'm not sure what you understand from the table, but I'll try to give you an idea. If you look at the first company listed there, it has WS and RT on the left-hand side. That's wholesale and retail. So what that'll show you is kind of the wholesale price and what the retail price is going to be, and that retail price is ultimately what students are going to get charged. So one of the bidders actually asked today, what is the board going to be looking for? Is it the student price? And I kind of said, well, I'm assuming student price will be part of that, but I'm not 100% sure since we haven't really talked. So this bid process comes up every 3 years. I actually talked about it with Ms. Klutz some today, obviously with a lot more experience with bidding process than I have. This is the first one that I have done. And in my mind, in our mind, I guess there are 3 components to the bids, which would be what are we going to charge the students, what's the price to students, and that's that retail price. What's the profit to the school? So the difference between that wholesale price and the retail price is what the school is going to make in that process. And then really the service that we get from the company. So again, today, what would have happened, we had it scheduled for Thursday. We would have had the bid processes, opened up the bids here on Thursday. Then I would have compiled that, emailed you guys to let you know, so you would have had it over the weekend, and then we could have talked about it tonight. Because of the weather, we had to switch that around, so we actually did it this morning here when we opened up the bids, and then we tabulated, and I tried to email and get it to you as soon as possible. So again, I wasn't exactly sure what information that you needed, but I wanted to give you the results of the bids and then tell you, make sure you could see those, and there's some big discrepancies in some, and when they were small, if there were people that we thought were competitive, then obviously we would call some neighboring districts and some neighboring schools, and we did some of that today to try to find out what references they had or what experience other systems had. I know that may be a little confusing, so I will certainly be glad to try to answer your questions if I can.
Mr. Harrison?
Just kind of an anecdotal question. Back not that far ago, long ago, when you were a principal, you said these were K through 8 as far as the plan was concerned, but back when you were a principal of a high school, what profit was your phrase did your high school tend to make on these arrangements with outside vendors? Can you give me because that to me is a big factor of what the school actually will net from these agreements.
That's a great question, and I wish our principals that were here wouldn't have left because they would be able to answer. Because I did that. The last time I was a principal was 10 years ago, and digital photography has changed all that. So I think the profit margin from when I was a principal is much smaller than it was 10 years ago because of the way photography has changed. So that profit margin part is what I was trying to explain here, but that depends on how many students you have. So obviously I was at a very large high school. I would have had a bigger profit than a very small elementary school, but even then the margin was considerably different because of the way photography has changed.
But that put in how many thousands of dollars into your
For
schools,
me as a high school principal in
recall?
2004, about $30,000.
And what'd you do with that?
That is, I don't know how Kelly would explain that, but
No, you spend it on the upkeep of the school somehow, I'm sure.
Picture money, yeah. In other words, there aren't that many strings around that, so you can spend it however you like. I think I spent that on a parking lot that's beside of the tennis court at Central Cabarrus High School.
Right. So, okay, that's just
But I
kinda
don't
wanna-
think if you're the principal at Central Cabarrus, Andrew Crook is not going to make $25,000 off
No.
pictures this.
But just the same, it's a big chunk of what the school's year-end balance for its own revenue is, or its own accounts, and you use that money for things like parking lots
That's right.
for all schools, not just the schools you fund through these profits what doesn't come from some other source.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a nice way of putting it, and still address the school needs that way.
Right.
David, I may answer your question as a
Thank you.
former elementary administrator. It's a significant chunk of money. I would guess I would say in high confidence, it's a big chunk for every elementary school. Not half of their budget, but it's a big chunk. I don't know. It's significant. It's something they plan for. Let's put it that way.
But again, it's
And I would say it's,
that are addressed, that were used for.
Correct. It gets to the students. Correct.
since they lost their ice cream money this year, I think it's even far more important.
Trying not to go there, actually. We're bringing up that ice
All right,
cream
board
money thing
members.
again.
Calm back down. Mr. Walter, did you have a comment?
Yeah, couple things. Is this a budgeted thing, Kelly? How does this work with the school? I mean, this is the first time it's come to us as a 2-year board member. I've not seen this before.
So each school would budget it at the school level, but it's certainly not something that comes up here at this level, at the central office level.
So this is school money spent the way the school needs it spent.
Right. So certainly, it's still taxpayer dollars, so they don't
Okay.
have complete flexibility. It still has to be within the guidelines of taxpayer dollars, but it's for student purposes and school uses.
Yeah, I mean, my just looking at it, if you're talking $22, I mean, it's $22 profit for each one of these packages or larger packages. I mean, that's $250,000 for all
Kelly
the schools.
can help me with that. It's it all depends on which package a student buys.
Sure.
So what we try to say there is there's a possibility of that, but the reality is most people are not going to spend $45 in pictures whenever they spend
Right,
that.
but if
So
you aggregate it with, you said it was K through 8, I mean, that's an awful lot of students, and that's probably, between $250,000 and $500,000 worth of profits back to school, or money back to the school. As far as the bid, do we have to do a bid? Is this actually an official bid where you have to pick a low bidder or high bidder or something, or do we have some flexibility here with this thing? Of course, I haven't seen the bid document or what was proposed.
This is not a item where we are required to bid. We chose to put it out to bid.
Okay.
And per our policy, we are now to consider price, quality, suitability for specified need, and timeliness of delivery and performance. So sort of all this information that's been presented to you, in addition to whatever other information Dr. Louder may have, can be considered by the board. But since we have put it out to bid, these are the results of the bid.
But there's
But
no
we're not
ranking,
required,
there's no rankings here. or
just
anything.
just like in all of our bids, we're not required to necessarily take the lowest dollar. We're able to look at other factors as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Powell?
Who is our current vendor?
Photo Memories has had that contract and is at the end of the 3-year. And traditionally, it's been a 3-year contract. Every 3 years, it's bid out.
Ms. Carpenter?
All right. Now, what my question is, does it have to be a 3-year contract? And I want to know where these other vendors, I mean, usually you'll show, and on our list, it'll show where these people are from. Now, one of these things, I like to give our stuff to our local people, but you're not telling me where these people are from. And I don't know, quality-wise, I don't know where these people are from. But two, if it's going to give a 3-year contract to somebody I don't know, that's why I want to know if it has to be a 3-year contract. If I don't have a known quantity here, and I
Right,
don't
so
know somebody.
I think, first of all, I'll send you where they originate from tomorrow. I'll just email all you guys that. Again, I wasn't exactly sure what everyone
But does
was
it
looking
have
for.
to be a 3-year contract?
And the answer to that is, so the last column there, 3-year option, yes or no, is we ask each one of the bidders that doesn't know what other people are bidding, will you hold these prices for the next 3 years? And all 5 that answered said yes, they would. But the answer is if you guys chose to make this a one-year contract, I guess you could. I mean, they're not required of that, but I think that's asked as a benefit to say, we know that prices won't go up for the next 3 years.
But two, if we're doing a contract with them, within our contract, we could put a get out of jail free card. You know what I'm saying? But what I'm saying is within that contract. But again, I'd like to know where these people are from.
Yeah,
I mean,
I can see
our
that.
dollars, the kids or the children that are paying for these dollars are raised in Cabarrus County. And if possible, to use a Cabarrus County individual, I always like to do that. But I'd like to know where these other vendors are from.
And when you say that, you mean like the company sometimes originates from, Raleigh, but they have lots of times people assigned all over the state. So we may have a rep that lives or works in Cabarrus County. So you just want to know where the company originates, or do you want to know where the service person that would handle this account would originate from?
But I'd like to know.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to keep our dollars here.
Okay.
I'll just make a comment. I know in the past, when I was on the board, and we always went with Photo Memories because they were local, but I don't know if they still meet the criteria or not. So, but it would be good, like Carolyn said, to know where the rest of them are from.
I'll email you that tomorrow.
Dr. Phillips?
Just looking at this, it would appear that Photo Memories, Metro Portraits, and Strawbridge Studios are all kind of grouped together in terms of pricing, and that Life Touch Studios and Shearling Photography are a little bit higher, both in the cost of the students and in the wholesale. So I would say that I would recommend that we focus on those first three that I mentioned, and we obviously have experience with Photo Memory, so we know what quality to expect from them. I would like to ask you between now and next week to follow up on, current customers of Metro and Strawbridge to find out what their experience is, and then report that back.
We started working on that today, as you said, but I know there are a number of Charlotte schools that work with one of the companies that you mentioned, and we had some Rowan County schools, so we had lots of references, and I'll send you all that. Now, obviously, we haven't worked individually with them, but we have plenty of people that'll give us references there.
All right, board members, I'm just going to put this on the action agenda, if that's okay, and we can have further discussion next week, if you don't mind.
Is staff going to give us a recommendation for this, or is this completely up to the board?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's up to the board, but I believe that I'm going to try, and I've obviously asked for Ms. Klutz's help with the financial aspect to say, looking at the whole package, because again, in my mind, and if you guys wanted me to look at something different, it's price to students, what are we going to charge students, how much profit is the school going to get, and what kind of service do we get? And those were the three things that we kind of decided that it would be up to, not one or the other, because you could be the cheapest offer to students but not give that much to the school and may not have good service. I mean, I'm just making this up.
I think that's completely reasonable, and I would like a recommendation from staff on this.
Yes. Especially once we get all the references back from some of the people. And one of the other companies has some significant history with Kannapolis, so we can get a really good reference there too.
And I'm sure you'll tell us, but how will, you don't need to answer it now, but how will you go about quantifying for us that service or that quality factor, if that's going to be a thing that we need to consider? I need to know your methodology, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the toughest one. We obviously have a lot of years of experience with Photo Memories, and then as we said, the other two that Dr. Phillips just listed would have a lot to do with specific questions to neighboring counties and school districts that have experience, because we're not going to have the same kind of one-on-one and then say to you, looking at the whole package, here's what we recommend, and then ultimately you guys will vote on that.
All right, this is on the action agenda. Let's go to 5.04, and Dr. Louder, you have some policies for second reading.
Right, these have gone through first read, and so now these are up for second read, and this was, again, I think a very brief meeting that we had. It was actually before a budget meeting, so we tried to keep the policies to ones that we did not think had a whole lot of changes. Most of them were complying with a lot of the police and safety issues, such as things that we've already complied with that the law requires. But again, we can field any questions if you have some, since we have passed these through on first read.
All right, let's look at 1510. Any comments on 1510, 4200, 7270?
I have comments on this one. The other ones seem to be fine to me. This one here, we did the change that the state has recommended, but if we go through and look at this thing, it just appears to me that there's more that's missing. It might be a good one to spend some more time on policy committee. We didn't really do that. We had a very rushed policy committee, the one that I attended. The second one was snowed out, so we didn't really have any kind of a detailed discussion on this policy. And just for a couple things that I had noticed, and again, without really getting a proper review of it, we have a policy committee, a policy that we're talking about here, another one that's for approval. Really, they should be somewhat referenced because they do talk about safety. There's only a small mention about health, safety. There's a whole lot of discussion about behavior. I just think if we're talking about school safety overall, that maybe we take another look at this and see if we can get some more, make it an overall safety policy. Some of the cross references, like the SROs, I think some of that stuff should be as well referenced in this policy, which doesn't have that cross-reference at this point.
I know one thing that Ms. Stone and I talked about, and she may want to speak to this. So when we get policies that ultimately recommend making specific changes because of changes in the law, which is where most of the red comes from in this policy, sometimes the rest of that policy may have numerous legal references that go back to statutes. And I know whenever we talked about this one, I think this one fits in that category. I don't know if Ms. Stone wants to speak to that a little bit.
I mean, looking specifically at 1510, this is a policy we've had in place since, I believe, 2001, and it incorporates about 15 or 16 different statutes and 2 different boards of State Board of Education policies. And so I think I want to make sure, perhaps we just need to talk offline about what your concerns are and are they addressed? Is this the right policy for them? Or are they addressed elsewhere? Because there are a lot of things.
That is a good question. That's a discussion for the policy committee.
Such as, we have a very detailed policy on pest management and things like that, which some may argue is a safety issue, but we actually have a whole separate policy that deals with this, whereas this is a bit more of an umbrella policy that's put in place, as part of the 1000 series, which are sort of our general, here's how we operate our schools on a broad brush perspective.
All right, board members, what's your wish? Do we let this one go through and then review some of these other ones to see if they pick up what Mr. Walter is talking about?
I'm okay with these changes, but I think we ought to look at some additional changes to this policy as well. So bring it back to policy committee as well.
I think, approve this one as is written and then bring it back to the policy committee for any other revisions.
I would be
I'd
okay
like to
with
do
that.
it. Okay, so this one will be a consent item. Let's move to 4201, 7271.
And this is the policy that really is a new policy from the state that essentially is saying comply with this. It has a lot to do with workman's comp. And we actually discussed this at the policy committee. To comply with this, we need to come up with a committee that ultimately, Mr. Shoemaker, I think, named Mr. Harrison and Mr. Walter as the board members. So there are some things in this policy that are new that we have not done, but we've already formed that committee. We were actually supposed to meet Friday for that too, but now we'll have to reschedule. So, and that committee will largely take the role of leading and saying, here's what we need to do. So there are some things that we don't have in place currently now that we have the plan to have in place that will lead with this. So I think we're in good shape with this, and obviously Ms. Stone is leading with that. But as several board members pointed out, wow, we don't have some of that. We need to put it in place. As soon as we actually have a meeting, then we're going to have it in place, and that'll guide our movement in this area.
Yeah, this is the policy that I'm really concerned about because I believe that we've got some major gaps here, not only probably in our schools, but the way this is written. I know our maintenance department needs to be updated in there. I don't even hear anything in here about lockout, tagout, and some of the OSHA, but I just feel like we've got to make sure that whatever we do with injury and loss, that we are on top of it, and that we put the infrastructure in place to support that safety component, especially when dealing with OSHA recordables. And as big as our district's getting and as proliferated with contractor safety. We've got a construction activity going on right now. I think that this policy probably needs a lot of extra overhead underneath of it to support it.
This is another one of those examples where it references the school safety policy, but it's not cross-referenced back from the.
And so again, I think when we met, Ms. Stone was satisfied when we met as a group, because obviously this was a new policy to say if we formed the committee and started moving forward with that, we were complying with the policy. But if there's specific things we need to change, then we can certainly do that. Just know which direction to move.
Well, you know, this is one of those, whereas it's the cart before the horse, or the horse, chicken before the egg, that type of thing, because here you're talking at the end on H, employee responsibility for safety. You're going to pass a policy for employee responsibility for safety, but do you have all the underpinnings that support the policy? If you don't have those, and you've actually passed a policy that forces you to be not up to date with where you need to be. So we probably need to coordinate this just a little bit better so that we don't pass a policy and then we're trying to play catch up the whole time to the policy, kind of synchronize it a little bit. Ms. Stone, did this come up as a new legislative requirement?
This is a direct mandate from the State Board of Education. And so we and every other school district in the state are currently having to adopt policies such as this and ensure that we have practices and procedures in place to comply with it.
So
and
what is our risk of having a policy without the practices to support the policy?
Well, I think the idea from the State Board of Education is you will adopt the policy and then you will go do what your policy says. So
is there a window of time to make us whole so that we have like a sunset time that we can work with?
I don't believe the state has actually given us that type of window to do it. They have said, though, that we need to have a policy in place. I believe it's by March. March 15th.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a deadline, and then they came back and said you can extend it if you need to, but.
Okay, so you're basically saying that we need to have this in place by March 15th. We could move this onto the consent agenda and then come back and revisit. I'd like to get updated where we are.
Compliance.
I guess that's going to be the policy committee's responsibility, but I'd like to know where we are in a couple months to make sure that we're following up on this policy, because I'm really concerned about it.
And I think this one will be less the policy committee and more the now I'm forgetting what, loss prevention. I think it was loss prevention committee.
Student health and...
No. The student health is more Ms. Smith's area. This is actually kind of the committee that the policy spells out. And so it's a loss prevention committee that has board members.
Health and Safety Leadership Committee.
Yeah. And it has some specific things. You need to do this, this, and this. And then when we get the group together, we start looking at our own areas where there have been accidents and how we can prevent that, and that kind of guides how we move forward, and I think everyone was comfortable with that when we reviewed that.
So there could be a budget impact down the road.
Oh, certainly, yeah. I think there will be recommendations that come from this on how we will train, how we will work with, but we almost have to get started a little bit and move in that direction because we have not had a committee in place since I've been involved.
Well, board members, do you agree with, let's put this on the consent agenda, if the Loss Prevention Committee gets together and sees that there needs to be addendums made to this particular policy, then they can identify those and we can move forward with this. All right? Let's go on to the next one, and that is 5121, relationship with law enforcement. Consent. Second reading. Okay. Consent. Next one is the occupational exposure, 7265. Consent? Okay. And finally, security of facilities, 9220. Consent? Consent. Okay, so all of our policies are on the consent agenda for our next meeting. All right, 5.05 supplemental funding for the Mount Pleasant Middle School. Mr. Dave Burnett, please come on down.
I did receive the construction documents estimate, the 60% CD estimate from the architects today. The architects did receive it a little bit earlier, did review it. When I did get the opportunity to review it this morning, I did see that there are a couple of changes that needed to be made. Those changes have been made. Certainly we'll need more time to go through it. But as you can see in front of you, I did put together the this phase budget worksheet. The construction cost estimate as modified from this morning, we had to add a few things and delete a few things, but that was $30,713,000. When you include various items such as construction contingencies, and in case we need to acquire some right of way, it was $31.9 million. The other cost that would be with the other project costs, really take that to project total without the stadium of $36.1 million, and with the partial stadium scope of $36.5 million. What we are asking for is to be able to go to the county commissioners in their next cycle, so that we can present these numbers to them, and that they can respond with when they will be able to fund the project.
Could you scroll this down so that we could see the total, please? Thank you. All right. So it's 36,132,000, and then with the partial stadium, that increases it to 36,557,000.
Yes.
All right, and our DD estimate was
this is slightly better. Certainly, we were hoping that it was going to be more of an improvement. As I did mention, as we did get to take a quick look at it, we did see one of the items that was an add this morning was that I saw that the estimator didn't include sales tax. As we bid the project, the contractors are required to provide all sales tax in their bid, so we have to cover that. So we have to be able to award a contract that would cover that amount. So we need the sales tax in there. They have since put that in. And we tried to identify any kind of duplication that might have been in there and pull that out. I did leave one of the things that I've mentioned before. I did think that the demolition costs were high, again, as compared to our Odell Elementary School. The last estimate, I did adjust that and used our number. This particular time, with the other adjustments that I made, I didn't change the demo cost on that. So hopefully this is $400,000 high. But time will tell when we do bid the project. That's the time that it really counts, and we'll see what a lot of contractors think. Now, in saying that, a contractor did look at this. So when we look specifically at the construction cost estimate, again, that was $30 million. I think it was $30.7 million. A contractor did think that it was maybe in the neighborhood of $28.5 million. So that's good. We don't want our estimator to be the low bid. So $28.5 million to $30.7 million is probably a range that we should expect the project to come in.
When you say 30.7 million, is that just for the construction?
That's the construction cost.
Okay. But we're not, but the overall project cost is still at the $36 million
Yes.
level. So, all right, board members, do you have any other questions for Mr. Burnett? Mr. Harrison?
Burnett, at the top of this page, it says bond monies. What am I missing?
That's a format that the county had asked that we provide some information, and so we just kept that. If this was going to be bond funded, there are certain things that you would want to have in bond funds and certain things that you wouldn't want. Technology is a good item not to fund with bond funds. Furniture and equipment may not need, you want something that's going to last 20 years, and if you're going to finance it for 20 years, you want it to be around for 20 years. It's just a general thought on that. So it was following a county format.
And in Mount Pleasant, they've got an expression that goes, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I would like to have a real good discussion about the option of asking for the funds with and without the stadium, because it's just such a long-term headache to build a school without a facility for sports activities that's adequate for the community that that they can maintain, and to have some partial sports facility or lack of one, or leaving the old facility on these grounds would ultimately be detrimental to the to really have a great school there, but without a modern or upgraded facility. But again, I just want to have an honest discussion about asking for the funds with and without the stadium needs, so that we can go forward and be on cue with the county commission and with their needs for accurate information from us, and then stay consistent, because then we would just come back in a year or two and start talking about the stadium, in the year 2020 or something like that. So if we can get to a point of discussing that in some detail, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, board members, the only real action that we need is for Mr. Burnett to clean up this estimate, make sure that the numbers are matched and that they haven't seen any omissions. And then if you look at the last sentence on our agenda, it says the superintendent recommends presenting this construction design estimate to the Board of County Commissioners, and the county will then review and determine when the funding will be available for us to bid/award the project. So there's really not a lot for us to do except to pass that on to them and let them assess this along with a number of other capital projects that they are currently working on.
Are you going to break out the demolition costs, or is that?
Actually want to take a more thorough look, and we'll talk with the architects, and we'll talk with if we need to talk with the estimator. It's possible. I mean, I want to, but I want to see how the other numbers are looking.
Yeah, I think that for a full information, I think that needs to come out to be shared as well. And again, I'm kind of with David there on, if you're going to, how long is the school? What's the lifespan of the school when we build it?
Of this new school?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we always say at least 50 years. It's more realistically, it's 75 years.
Well, 50 to 75-year school, and we don't touch the stadium. I think you need to do both.
Yeah, the challenge, of course, is the money, and it is a facility that we own and operate and need to maintain. And whether it's part of project funds or whether it's a different funding source, that discussion, that argument needs to continue to be made.
We will present everything to the commissioners, and then it'll be a discussion after that as to how they want to deal with this project, along with all the other project funding requests that they have. Ms. Carpenter?
Well, I think our main thing is, and that was what we were supposed to be having on the agenda, is to get it to them now, and I think that was what our decision is just to get the numbers to them, and I think that's what our thing was, is to get these numbers and to say, go with it, because that was what we did. We held off, and now it's to say go, and I thought that was what our decision was just tonight, was to say do it and to bring it forth, and that's,
So the only question is, do you think this is a consent or an action? Do y'all want to see what his refined numbers before he sends it up?
I'd like to see the refined numbers.
Okay, so the action will just be to see these refined numbers.
Do they want a resolution from us asking for a bond for this, or is it?
It's not it wouldn't be a bond request. We're just informing them of what the expected cost is, and then they will determine the best way.
I'm just somewhat confused on how you did that. Okay. Yeah,
that's the format that we're following.
They just want to break out the true capital monies that would be possibly eligible for long-term debt versus monies that you would spend with real real dollars right now.
Right. Didn't we do something like that last year when we sent them
Yes.
a resolution that had
But we don't need to send a resolution at this point. They're not looking for that. They just want to see what the costs are. They've got a lot of decisions to make with capital, and we're not the only fish in the pond for that particular issue, and they just want to see what this is so they can bake this in with all the other requests they've got. All right. Let's move on to, that's on the action agenda, and now we'll go to 5.06, which is the Royal Oaks Replacement Facility. Mr. Dave Burnett, you present to us.
Okay. In this particular item, we expect that we'll stay on the action agenda for the March 9th meeting. At the last Board of Education meeting, the board made two requests. It was, number one, confirm a 625 student school would fit on the current site with some conditions. Those conditions were to basically to keep the existing brick and mortar school operational during construction. The other request was to keep the 1998 building, which is what we've been calling the primary grades building, keep that for future use. So the answer to that, number one item was yes. We believe we can satisfy those conditions, and that a school of that size or even a little bit larger can be constructed on that site, keeping the other school operational and keeping the 1998 building for future use. So that is number one. That's a great thing. And we also looked at, well, how can we go further? Can we make a larger school? And we did, and we had some discussions about that earlier today. So we were pursuing an 800 student school. We do think that we can have one fit on the site, and the real question would be, is that really what we want to do? But we do think that we can have one fit, and we do plan to have some further discussion on that. Number two was to develop a list of alternative sites in the event that the existing Royal Oaks school site doesn't pan out for whatever reason. And that effort is underway. We did have a committee meeting today and went through a couple of the sites, and that is something that's in process. We do think we had a productive meeting. We do think that we'll come back to you next week to look at those sites and possibly other information.
All right, board members, as Mr. Burnett said, we can put this on the action agenda for Monday's meeting. Do you have any other questions that you want to ask to him right now on this particular one? There's really not a lot more to share.
Email us a sketch on how that actually fits on that property? I mean, it doesn't have to be much, it just has to be something.
Certainly, and that's something that we really do want to be careful about. When we release a sketch, often it becomes, that nails it down, that's how it's going to look. We don't have a survey yet, so certainly we do want to have that. But we do feel good that some of the sketches and some of the concepts that we have worked up, will pan out, will fit, are manageable, but I always like to have it on, with survey information and, real data, so that we really feel confident, that what we're showing and how we're showing it is going to be a workable solution. Like I said, we feel good that it is, but, we would love to have that survey data first.
Dr. Phillips?
So how are we looking on schedule? Because I know that it was pretty tight. You wanted to get all of this to be in a position where I think it was next March we could go to the county and say, okay,
yeah.
here's what we're going to need to do this. So I understand next steps are you are asking for the county for a little bit of money to do some drilling to verify that the site really is buildable.
That's right.
And then, at what point would you be in a position to say, we're ready to start design at this site if you tell us to?
So earlier this evening, and Kelly and I were at the Board of County Commissioners meeting. On the agenda was the $30,000 for Royal Oaks for geotechnical work and for survey work. And so that process is underway. The schedule is a big concern. We have a lot of decisions that we have to make. We really can't nail down the architect's contract until we nail down the program and until we nail down the site. So those things do need to happen. And the longer we take on that, the less production is going to be underway. And so that certainly is a concern. So we're at the point where we really do want to be moving. What we would love to be able to do is to complete the design effort in October and start the agency review at that point, so that building permits and things like that are not a problem, and that would allow time to react to the agency reviews, incorporate those into the bid documents, have the bids go out without having any change orders after the fact, after we bid, based on review comments. So hopefully I've answered your question in there.
Well, it sounds to me like we won't have a decision at least until April, because you're going to have to do the drilling assessments during March. Is that correct?
We hope to be able to do that work in the month of March. We do expect the survey will take about 30 days.
Okay. And as far as the other sites that you're looking at, I assume we'll have to do that, Mr. Chairman, in a closed session, since you would be talking about specific locations. So we'll have that.
That'll be
next
at
week.
next Monday's meeting, our
Okay.
business meeting. In our closed session, we'll have a discussion about that. Yeah, we can work out. I'll talk with each of you to see if y'all can meet early. Maybe we could have it earlier. All right. So we'll have this on the action agenda for next week. You mentioned that we need to nail down the program. Where does that? Who does that, or do you provide a recommendation to us? Help me with the logistics of getting this
I'd like
program. Is that Dr. Shepard? Is that your team's?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
we'll be providing the recommendation.
So y'all will be providing one to us, possibly as early as
Actually, we were going to talk about it tomorrow.
business meeting. Okay, well, 10:15.
It does seem that if at least the initial survey is or the initial assessment is saying you could build an 800 student school on the Royal Oak site, then perhaps we can at least agree on, we want an 800 student school. Now, if it turns out that the Royal Oak site is not buildable, then we say, all right, well, you got to take it to a different site. But that would be the preference of the board. Could we agree at that?
I'd like to see our student assignment committee take a look at that prior to making that call, because we might not have 800.
But we need to act fast. We can't delay this month after month. We need to make a decision, and we need to make it quickly. So how can we make that happen?
I'd make myself available.
One of the things to consider, you've got a population right now at Royal Oaks of 300 and some odd students. And then Beverly Hills is 300 and some odd students. If you make that school 670 something students, you have already doubled the size of that school. You could put both of those schools in that school with making it just 600 and something. So if you make that school 7 something, you've already doubled that capacity. You have got to consider the what those roads can take and everything, and this is discussions we've had. So if you can get a 700 school or 725, I think you're doing good. And you've already doubled that capacity. Then you could use that school when you're trying to upgrade Beverly Hills. You can use that school when you're wanting to upgrade Colt. I mean, you've doubled that capacity. And to me, that's accomplishing something. Then you could take children, if Weinkauf goes over capacity, then after you've done all those things, then you can use it as a magnet. So you've accomplished a lot of things with that. So not going to 8 or 9, then the money you have, I mean, there you're still saving some money in the long run I mean, we've only been, given that 11 million. I mean, we still know we're going to go over, but still you're getting that capacity.
Mr. Powell?
Have we had any talks with the city of Kannapolis about building out those roads? What we're going to have to do to upgrade those roads around that school for a 600, 700, 800 student school?
We have. The initial response is that we would have to improve Dakota Street in front of the property, the road frontage. If you're familiar with that area, there was an improvement a while back that had curb and gutter and sidewalk. We would be expected to do the same thing for our road frontage.
Anything regarding fire safety, et cetera, is that the same? They're speaking on behalf of each other?
Yeah, as far as fire safety, what we would be trying to do, as with any project, is to construct a fire lane or fire lane around the facility, and that we would intend to do the same thing here. Currently, in fact, we did have a discussion briefly with the fire marshal, who was very happy to hear that the shared drive that's between the church and the school, that we were going to, as we would improve the facility and replace the facility, actually, that we would improve that situation. So I'm not anticipating any issues there, that we will construct the fire lane as we do on every project.
All right, folks, we'll put this on our agenda for next week as an action item. And if you can, we have 2 more items that we have to discuss, but I think we need an opportunity to take a small 5-minute break. So, board members, it is right now 9:31 by my watch. I'll see you at 9:36, and we'll take a 5-minute break.